So, good morning and welcome to this session. So, let me introduce myself first. My name is Ligia Matthew, and I am a doctor by profession. I was trained to be an anesthetist, somebody who puts people to sleep before surgery. And God gave me an opportunity to get training in another field of medicine called palliative medicine. And I come from India, from South India, a place called Kerala. And after my medical studies, I moved from South India to North India to work in a remote mission hospital. And by God's grace, we could spend nearly 10 years in a state called Bihar, right at the Indo-Nepal border. And while we were working there, we took a study leave and went to the UK, and that's where I did my studies in palliative medicine. So my talk today is going to be on palliative care and geriatric care and how we can use it for kingdom building purposes. So let me start with the story of a middle-aged lady I was caring for in the last couple of weeks. Right now I'm working in Kerala, I'm back in Kerala now, and I work in a medical college there. And this is a patient whom I took care of in the last couple of weeks. She's a middle-aged lady. She was diagnosed with carcinoma colon cancer in 2022. And you can see there the timeline. She had to undergo various treatment. She underwent a hemicolectomy in 2022. That is, a part of her colon was cut off because that was the cancerous part, and followed by several cycles of chemotherapy. And by the end of 2022, she thought that she's fully cured. So she was sharing with me that I was happy. I thought my disease is gone. But unfortunately, in February 2023, she developed a swelling over her abdominal wall. And the investigations which the doctors did, like CT scan and all the other investigations, revealed that her cancer has come back. It's called a recurrence. And following that, she had to undergo a lot of treatment again. From February 2023 till the last admission where she was with us, I was going through her chart. She had almost 30 admissions in hospital for multiple reasons, for chemotherapy, for complications, for symptom management, for all that. And during this time, she was undergoing multiple cycles of chemotherapy also. This is her last admission. She was admitted last month on 28th. And that was when she was referred to our team for the first time, to the palliative care team. So even though she has been coming from 2022, we had never seen her. Our team had never taken care of her. And this was the first referral. So she was admitted with abdominal pain, which was colicky abdominal pain. And the CT scan, which was done, revealed that her disease has progressed. It has gone further. And there was a bowel loop which was perforating through the abdominal wall, meaning the intestine, the growth from the intestine went on to the abdominal wall, and fecal matter was coming through her abdominal wall. So it is called a condition called enterocutaneous fistula. So that is when we saw her for the first time in the ICU. She was very sick. And she was in so much of pain and very depressed. So we were wondering how to help, and the primary team which was caring for her over the last 2 years, they were also at a loss. They didn't know what more to offer, because this condition is not operable. You cannot operate on this. And that's when we were thinking what to do for her. So we managed her conservatively. We put, her abdomen was distended. We put a nasogastric tube. And decompressed her abdomen. Then the fecal matter was coming through the abdominal wall. Then it was coming through the thigh also. And she was in so much of shame. She didn't even want us to examine her. The minute we open, she tells, don't open, there'll be so much of smell and all that. So that stigma was also there in her. And we cleaned the wound, we put colostomy bag. And for her pain, we started her on opioids called morphine tablets, which, and also we added on a patch, a medicine called fentanyl. Both these medicines help in her pain management. And all the other things which needed, like talking to the family, making them understand the condition, all that our team did. So it was a team effort. Our sisters, then the chaplain, all of us together, we supported the family. So this is her story, and she's still with us in our hospital. And there is one more swelling which she has developed, if you can see here. And now we are waiting for that to break, so that once this breaks, all these secretions will come down. That's what the gastrosurgeon told, so that we can put the stoma back there. So this is a condition at which I left her with my team there, and then I came here. So why I presented this case is because I just want you to see the suffering that she's going through, the different domains of suffering that she's going through. She is physically suffering. There's a lot of anxiety, pain, fear, all this psychological aspect. Then socially, the family actually, they have not shared this diagnosis with anybody. So surprisingly, the husband was telling me that only the immediate family knows. Immediate in the sense, the husband, wife, and the children. Only they know the diagnosis. None of the extended family knows about it because they are worried about the social stigma. And that is one reason for this prolonged hospital admission also. They don't want to go back home because they tell, if you go back home, visitors will start coming. We don't want to explain everything to them. So socially they're suffering. Then there's so much of financial drain which has happened over the last 2 to 3 years. They've gone to multiple hospitals, multiple surgeries, chemotherapy. They're financially also drained out. And then coming to the spiritual part of it, she was, after a few visits, she started opening up to me. She was telling like, why I'm suffering like this at the prime of my life. There's so much of unfinished business in my life. My daughters are not married. There's so much more to do in my life, and why I'm suffering like this. It's not God seeing my suffering. So a lot of existential questions and spiritual questions she was asking me. So this is actually what palliative care is all about, the previous slide. Yeah, so here, this is something what we call as total pain or total suffering. This is a terminology which is coined by the founder of palliative medicine, modern palliative medicine, the founder, Dame Cicely Saunders. She was the person who termed coined this term of total suffering. So if you look at this, there is a suffering in all these areas. It's not just a physical aspect. As doctors, many times we treat the physical aspect of the disease, but there's lots more that we have to address, and that is what palliative care is all about. I'm not sure how many of you sitting here have heard about palliative care. Have you all heard about palliative care? Yeah. So I explain in detail so that you understand what this branch of medicine deals with. So as you know, WHO definition of health is not just absence of disease, but a wellness in all these domains. And the annual worldwide statistics show that 54 million people die, and out of this, majority die of progressive organ failure, different organs. So palliative care is not caring for cancer only, but multiple organ failures also. Palliative care covers all those diseases. Then 8.5 million die from cancer, and 1.5 million die from HIV and AIDS. Just a little bit about the history of palliative care. Cicely Saunders, an English lady, she was trained as a nurse, as a social worker, and then later on as a doctor. It's very interesting. Her story is very interesting. So she was initially trained as a nurse. Her parents didn't want her to become a nurse, so she just waited, did some other course, and then in Second World War, she decided to become a nurse. In 1944, 1940 to 44, she was trained as a nurse and she worked as a nurse. And then in 1944, she sustained a back injury. And after that, she decided to become a medical social worker. She wanted to be involved with patients, so she decided to become a medical social worker and got her training in social work. And after that, she was working among the patients, and because of her back pain, she couldn't uh, do the day work. So she asked her supervisor for the night duties, and during those night duties, she was seeing these patients who were dying and suffering, and that's when she felt that there's a need to care for the dying patients. And she shared this with many of the doctors, but they were not paying attention to her. So she decided that I will become a doctor, and then I will do my work in this area of medicine. So that she went on to train as a doctor, which she completed in 1957. And after that, she did a lot of work, wrote a lot of articles on this specific area. And she went on to develop a hospice movement. So the first hospice was built by her. It's called St. Christopher's Hospice, where the specifically it was to care for the dying poor patients. And this she did with the help of a well-wisher who donated some money. And from then on, she raised funds and developed this hospice movement in the UK. So what is the meaning of palliative care? The word palliative, it's derived from a Latin word called pallium, which means a cloak, meaning you are covering a lot of symptoms with a cloak. So it's the main aim is to promote comfort. So the main aim of palliative care is to provide comfort, to relieve suffering. That is a primary goal. And along with that, the family is also suffering, so you support the family in coping with the disease and also in bereavement. Once a patient dies, the family is left in grief, so we support them. So that is a primary aim. So the focus is on quality of care, not in increasing the quantity of life, but in improving quality of life in the middle of suffering. Next slide. Next. So these are the domains. The disease-specific treatment will be going on. Symptom control is a major part, but this aspect also is given a lot of importance, the psychosocial and spiritual care. So what is the difference between the conventional medical approach and the palliative approach? So in the conventional approach, everything is about the disease, but here it's more patient-centered, what the patient wants. So the patient's autonomy is respected. What patient tells, I don't want a treatment, we respect that. And the main aim is comfort, and the intent is healing. Even though you cannot cure always, you can heal. We'll come to that later. The goal is to improve quality of life. So this is a valuable approach for patients who are facing life-limiting illnesses and also life-threatening diseases. So just to explain what I was telling now, this is the usual thing what happens. This aggressive medical care goes on for a long time, then suddenly comes the death. So that is what happens. So in this period, there's hardly any support which they get in terms of symptom management and also in terms of psychological support. So this is the ideal way to do it. Can you put the next slide? Next one. Yeah. So many of the diseases are found during a hospital visit, during a screening, and then here the diagnosis happens, then the curative treatment starts, and along with that, this is the ideal way of doing it. The active disease-directed treatment is going on at the same time with an early referral to palliative. We can start off there. So as time goes by, the curative phase comes down because then there may not be much treatment available. Most of the treatments may not be effective, so the curative intent comes down and the palliative involvement goes up. So there is a phase when there's purely palliative. So there's lots that we can offer at this phase. And then there is the end of life care. This is a separate part of palliative care. But many times people think that palliative care is only about end of life care. That's not true. End of life care is part of palliative management. And then this is also important, the bereavement part, because the family is left alone with, when the loved one is gone, they go through a lot of grief process, and that's where we can support them. Next slide. So that's our palliative nurse. She's with, during one of our home visits, she's spending time with an old, one of our patients. So these are the aspects, the different characteristics of palliative care. Major part is providing symptom management from pain and other distressing symptoms. And we affirm life, but we don't believe that death is to be fought at any cost. We regard dying as a normal process. So we integrate psychological and spiritual aspects to the patient care. Same thing, just to reiterate again, we recognize that people are not just organs put together, but they have mind, spirit, and emotions. So we address the whole person. And that holistic approach is what separates palliative care from the conventional medical care. And many times we see that problems, the pain or symptoms worsen mainly because there are other aspects to it. If the patient is emotionally upset, the pain that they experience is more. So once the emotional aspect is covered, we see that pain control is much better, or even other symptoms also. So as I mentioned earlier, it's not only about cancer care. All these diseases come under palliative care. End-stage kidney disease, liver disease, lung, heart, various advanced neurological illnesses, Parkinson's, dementia, all this. And if you look at this graph, you can see that the disease trajectory is different for each of this. This red line which you're seeing is how cancer progresses. It comes like this, it's kind of stable till a period, and then there's a sudden dip. Whereas in chronic illnesses, what you see is that they have these dips, but then they come back to the normal, and then they have this dip. But on the whole, the graph is going down, and then one of these episodes will move them into the terminal phase. In chronic neurological illnesses, the graph is just slowly going down. So each of these diseases we have to prognosticate differently. We have to explain to the patient family differently what they have to expect and prepare the family. Yeah. Coming to a major aspect of palliative care is taking care of patients who are dying. As we all know, death is an inevitable part of life, and it is every human being's right to get good end-of-life care. And there's a whole person care approach in this, and this cannot be done by one person alone. A doctor cannot give all this care alone, and that is where the multidisciplinary team approach of palliative care comes. And we know that as Christians, we believe that in the sanctity of life, but at the same time, we have to accept that we should not go to all measures to prolong life, which is not going to be meaningful. So the quality is important, not just the quantity. And decision making is one area that we focus on a lot in end-of-life care, because towards the end of life, there are a lot of decisions to make, like whether to continue with the treatment or not, whether to resuscitate a patient. That means if the patient becomes very sick, patient has a cardiac arrest, whether you should resuscitate that patient and bring back to life, put them on ventilators, whether we should give ICU care or not. So a lot of decisions are there. And all this is decided by, not by the patient, by the family. And many times the family members are not there at this. Throughout the care, they may not be there. And towards the end of life, they all come together from different parts of the world sometimes in our case. And we see a lot of confusion at this time. And this is where we help them to understand the prognosis and support the family in making the right decision. So always they have this confusion whether they're making an ethically correct decision by not offering the treatment. Are we withholding something which is good for the patient? So all this kind of confusion many times we see families going through. So that is one area where we work in closely with the families. Next. One of the main aspects is pain and symptom management. Many times we see that patients who are dying towards the end of life, they have a lot of symptoms. Some of them have pain, some of them have breathlessness, some of them have abdominal distension, and various things like that. So symptom management forms an important part. And once you control that symptoms, that gives so much of relief for the family and for the patient. Next thing which I told is the clear decision making. Once the decision is made, you can prepare the patient for death. That is helping patients know what they could expect during the end of life and helping them to plan for the events that would follow after death. Then there's completion, that includes saying goodbye and all that. So for that, it's important to find out which is the place they would want to be when they're dying. Would they like to be at home, or would they want to be in the hospital? So we have experiences of patients preferring to go home. Many of them prefer to go home. They say that they want to be in their room, in their bed, surrounded by their family members. So many times, if there's no one to coordinate that in the hospital, we see that many of them die in ICU, surrounded by strangers, hooked up to ventilators. So it's so important to give that completion to the patient. And for that, again, early referral to palliative is important. We need to start working with the family and with the patient right from beginning so that we develop a relationship with them. And the trust has to be built. And we can help them to go home and to be peaceful with their family members. And sometimes we've seen patients wishing to be in hospital also, because some of them have severe breathlessness. Patients who have been diagnosed with lung cancer, they suffer with a lot of breathlessness, so they're scared to go home. So in such situations, we help them to continue in the hospital, give them the care that they want. The discussion happens every day. What would you like to have? I've had patients who wanted to be in the high dependency unit so that they feel the nurses are nearby, the ventilator is there to support them. So they have opted for that. So we support in that. So whatever the patient wants. So it's not like we do not give ventilator to any patient. But if the patient wants that, if the patient feels that that will help them to get rid of the symptoms, we support in that. And this is a 6-step approach. I will not go into the details of that, but one thing is that assessment and reassessment is something which we keep doing in palliative. We see these patients every day, whether the primary team refers to us or not. We go and see these patients every day, and we assess their symptoms every day, and we write medications every day. Pain also is something which has to be assessed every day. Next slide. So coming to the kingdom building aspect of palliative care, why am I presenting palliative care here in this conference is because I feel this is one branch of medicine where it goes hand in hand with the Nazarene Manifesto, which the Bible says, that is to care for the poor and to be with those who mourn. And this, you get so much of opportunity here. I have had patients who have told that just be there. Many times we think that if you're doctors, if you are there, we have to keep on prescribing medications or doing. No, just our presence itself is something which they value so much. And so it resonates with the healing ministry of Christ that affirms the sanctity and dignity of human life from the moment of conception to natural death. So palliative care fosters a compassionate and supportive community because as I mentioned, it's not done by just one doctor. It is done as a multidisciplinary team, which includes people from the community also, volunteers. They form a big group in helping advancing palliative care into the community. So I will not go through this again. It's about improving quality of life and helping patients to live fully till the day of their death, along with supporting families. And spiritual growth is also something which happens in that time. Sometimes in suffering, that is where you see God very close to us. And we are seeing these patients at the most vulnerable point in their life, and you have a great opportunity actually to sensitively share gospel with them. So we get a lot of opportunities in sharing gospel with our patients. So this is where the concept of whole person care comes. So we believe that life is a sacred gift, and even though these patients are frail and weak and dying, we feel that they need that respect that they deserve. We need to care for them. They need to feel heard. They should not feel abandoned. Many times they feel abandoned, not only by the family members, by the medical system itself. So they have so much of hopelessness in them, and this is where we can really minister to them. And another aspect is reconciliation. This is a time when patients start opening up about their life stories, life regrets. They tell, many of them share with us about the regrets that they have in life, the fights they would have had with close family members. And they, at this point, they wish for a reconciliation, not only with God, also with their loved ones. So we provide a platform for that. Many times we have created an environment where they got that opportunity. And for each patient and for each family, the spiritual needs are different. And also at different times of the illness, the needs are different. So we need to be sensitive to that. We need to have discernment in ministering to them at different phases of their disease trajectory. Yeah. So as I mentioned, it is a multidisciplinary team approach. This is again something which was brought about by Cicely Saunders. She stressed so much on this multidisciplinary team effort, because this cannot be done by one person. Our team has, the doctor is not the main person in our team. This is a full team effort. Every person has their own place in the team where they play an important role. So there's a nurse manager, the physiotherapist, the occupational therapist, then our psychologists, they address all the psychological issues. Then we have our pastor who prays with the patient. We inform him and he comes and prays with the patient. Then the volunteers are there, the community volunteers. So these are our services. Just quickly going through our services. We have outpatient care, inpatient care, we have day care, and our main work is home-based care. We try to get our patients ready to go home as early as possible. We tell them not to stay in the hospital too long. Once they're well enough to go home, we send them home and we follow them up with our home visits. So we make a schedule of going and visiting them, and all the symptoms are managed at home. We even give anticipatory prescription, meaning we tell them these are the symptoms you can expect, then these are the medicines you have to take if you face these symptoms. So we equip the patient and the family to manage most of the illness symptoms towards the end at home, empowering them to stay at home as long as possible, not to spend their last days in the hospital. These are some of the procedures that we do usually. We get patients with bad gangrene, so that's where we are doing a dressing for foot gangrene. Some of our patients are not able to take food orally, so we put nasogastric in the tubes for food tubes for feeding. Then for pain, we do give nerve blocks. Some of our patients come with breathlessness, and we do an X-ray and we see that the chest is full of fluid. So we tap that fluid, that is pleural fluid tapping. We take out that fluid, their symptoms get better, and they go home. So those are all done as daycare procedures. That is the daycare aspect of our service. That is an ascitic fluid tapping, meaning the patient had chronic liver disease and he developed fluid accumulation in the abdomen, which was growing big and he couldn't lie down. So we tap and take out the fluid and send them home. Next slide. Let me tell briefly about the story of this man. Mr. Thomas. that's not his real name. So he was a businessman from Dubai. His wife is also there, and he had 3 children, 3 daughters. The oldest daughter got married, and soon after that marriage, he was diagnosed with chronic liver disease and presented very late, like in a decompensated stage, meaning he was very sick. He had huge fluid collection in the abdomen, and he was very sick. And the second daughter's marriage was decided, was fixed for a certain date. But then he became bed-bound by then. And then they were wondering how to take him to the church and how can he attend the wedding. So there's a lot of pain that they were going through as a family. So we discussed this with our chaplain, and we thought that it will be good for him. It came to a point where we knew that he cannot go to the church and attend the function. So we spoke to our chaplain, and we planned something like a small ring exchange so that he can be part of it. And the wedding will take place later on. So when we planned all this, and the day was fixed, and then suddenly the previous day, the youngest daughter opened up the last minute and told that she loves someone and there's a boyfriend and she would like to get married to him. So this was a surprise for the family. They didn't know about this. The father didn't know about this. And all of a sudden, like in 2 days' time, the youngest daughter's boyfriend also traveled from Dubai and came down. So they all came to a hospital. And in a hospital room, we arranged a ring exchange for both the daughters. So the father could see the son-in-law whom he wouldn't have even known if not for this. And so this is just a small video of that.
ഈ കുഞ്ഞുങ്ങളെ പ്രത്യേകിച്ച് ആന്റണിയുടെ കരങ്ങളിലും നീവായ നിഷാന്തിന്റെ കരങ്ങളിലും ഈ പിതാവ് ഏൽപ്പിക്കുന്നതായിട്ടുള്ളൊരു ചടങ്ങ് പോലാണ് നമ്മളിത് ആക്കാറുള്ളത്. അതുകൊണ്ട് ഇത് നിമ്മി നിമ്മിയാണ്. നിങ്ങൾ രണ്ടുപേരും കൂടെ കരം പിടിച്ച് മോന്റെ വലത്ത് കരങ്ങളിലോട്ട് പിടിച്ചു. നീവായ നിഷാന്ത് നിങ്ങൾ പോലെ ഐക്കളുടെ കാര്യങ്ങളും കൂടെ പിടിച്ചു കൊടുത്താൽ ഓക്കെ. നിമ്മി ആൻഡ് ആന്റണി ഓക്കെ ഓക്കെ സാർ പപ്പായത്തിൻ്റെ കൊടുക്കുന്നു. അങ്ങനെയാണെങ്കിൽ ആന്റണി ഇത് ആന്റണി അല്ലേ? കറക്റ്റ് അല്ലേ? നോക്കിയാൽ മതി. അപ്പോൾ ചെന്നിട്ട് പപ്പായിട്ട് കൊടുത്തു. പപ്പ അങ്ങോട്ട് എന്നിട്ട് മോനെ അമ്മ പറയുന്നത് എക്സ്ചേഞ്ച് ചെയ്ത് അമ്മ പറഞ്ഞു താഴെ വിടുന്നതാണ് സൂക്ഷിക്കുക. എന്നിട്ട് എക്സ്ചേഞ്ച് ചെയ്തു. നോക്കും
There's one more video where the second daughter, the youngest daughter also gets that, and then he prays. Yeah. This is another ministry which we have started recently, music ministry among the patients whom we visit at home. That's my colleague, Dr. Ajit C. Koshi there, and he's a gifted musician. So when we go for home visits, after doing the physical aspect of care, we share a little bit from the gospel, and then he sings for them. And they all, irrespective of the religion, many of them enjoy that. Not only in Christian families, even in other families also, they tell, okay, you can sing. We love to listen to your music. So I have one video of that. 1 or 2 videos. This can you come to that video? Yeah. Here actually this is a patient with advanced Parkinson's, this lady whom we are caring for, and her husband is a retired naval officer. He also plays a lot of instruments. So whenever sir goes for home visit, he also brings out his instruments, and together they do this. And the patient is also very happy. You can play that now. So the husband looks forward to the home visits. So the family is also involved in that. This is an old age home that we regularly visit. Yeah, that's about our home visits. Then another area that we are getting more involved is in different training programs. We are part of the IAPC, that is the Indian Association of Palliative Care. They run a course, a basic course, training the doctors and nurses. And we are also one of the training centers. Those are some of our candidates. You can go to the next. Another training program that we started last year is a leadership training program. It's called a Compassionate Leadership Fellowship. The aim is to develop compassionate leaders in the field of palliative care. And we had candidates coming from all over India and also from abroad. Two of our candidates were from Kenya. So this was started just last year. The aim is to empower and create empathy and to create leaders who are compassionate to work in the field of palliative care in India. Next slide. This is a project which we recently started in a village called Mundiapalli, which is very near to our main hospital, just 7 kilometers from our main hospital. The aim of developing this center was to create an age-friendly community in that area, to create an age-friendly center. And these are the different phases that we have planned. I will not go into the details of that, but the ultimate aim is to create a center where elderly people can come for any need that they have. Not only medical needs, if they need any other kind of support, they can come to this center. That is the ultimate aim of this place. So this is how that place has been renovated. It was a closed down CNI hospital. We have taken it over and we have renovated it. So right now there are OPDs and daycare which is functioning, and this month we are going to inaugurate the long-term facility. This is a long-term facility where we are going to have patients for rehabilitations, patients who are bedridden, and those who have palliative care needs. We are planning to admit them here at a very low cost. So that is the plan. And hopefully by this month we'll be opening it. Next. slide. This is a team, and we also do a lot of outreach work in and around the villages in our medical college. This is a training which we did in one of the churches recently. This is another talk which we gave to improve awareness on palliative care in the community around, because even people around, they still don't know what palliative care can offer. So we do these outreach activities very frequently. I just want to introduce you to this concept of palliative care, whether if you want to start this in your setting, how can you do this? The next slides are based on that. Actually, it can be an important outreach activity for any organization or church. So how can you start? Same models of care. You can either start as a home-based care, an OPD, IP, daycare, but for this you need a medical support. But home-based care can be done even by volunteers. So next slide. So what you need to do is, it depends on the local need. You have to see what your community needs. So who needs palliative care in your community, you need to assess. You need to find out what are their main problems and what are the help that they're getting right now. And what can you add to improve that care and make it holistic? So touching on all the aspects which I mentioned earlier, this is something which even lay people can start in their community. You don't need a lot of medical knowledge to start a palliative work. So this can be an outreach work from your youth groups. It can be done from your a group of people, maybe from a group who come together for fellowship. So anybody can start actually. But definitely you need to take some basic training. So there are volunteer trainings which are available, which is available even online also. And this is a great opportunity, actually a golden opportunity to reach out to people who are suffering, and a golden opportunity to share gospel also. You're getting an opening into their homes. So you need to start by selecting your team. It's good if you can get a medical help from somewhere nearby. Some friend of yours or a doctor from your community who's willing to volunteer part of his time, that will be good. Even nurses will be there in many of the communities. Nurses are there who are willing to volunteer a bit of their time. And community and social workers, counselors, pastors, volunteers, all of them can contribute to start the palliative work. And we need to realize that all the team members are equal in worth. So all of them can bring their own expertise in different areas. I told the different domains that palliative is touching. So each of these people can contribute to that. The doctor's part or the nurse's part comes only a small part of it. The remaining all aspects can be met by the rest of the team. Yeah, again the same thing, you have to decide who should be in the team and what each person's role should be. I prepared these slides thinking it is a workshop, so I was thinking like there are more people how to start a palliative work, just wanted to give an idea. Yeah, just getting in contact with the different people in the community, the local practitioners, like-minded NGOs, there will be local healthcare workers, people living in villages. Actually, people can come together and help each other. It is as simple as that. You're helping somebody. The medical aspect is a small part of it. You're helping somebody who is suffering. You can even direct them to hospitals. You can give them ideas on how to care. With little bit of training, actually, anybody can do palliative care. Main thing is that you have to decide which model you want to adopt. Actually, a home-based service is the best. And again, these are the things you have to decide. How much of area you will cover, how many homes you would visit in a week, how much you will do. So all this comes in the planning aspect. And sometimes it's good when you're launching a new palliative care service, you can invite somebody who's known in the place, in the village, to give it some publicity. Next. Many of you would have heard about a drug called morphine, which is frequently used in palliative to give relief of pain. Even without morphine, you can start palliative work. There are other medications which you can give for pain. but it's good to get a morphine license also. And for this, I think you need to be in touch with a doctor in the local area. Finance is another major issue. How you will finance the service, you will have to plan for that regarding fundraising and from where money will come. But our experience is that whenever you start something with a good intention, money will come. Money will be the last of the problems. If you have enough people with good intentions and who have a heart to serve, people who are committed, if you can find a group like that, if you can form a group like that, money will come. But still you need to plan for it. So these are things that we tell very often in palliative, that we may not be able to cure always, but we can definitely heal and comfort. So healing is not just the physical aspect. We are touching the spiritual, psychological, emotional aspect. In all those areas, we can heal the patient. So many of them know that their illness is not going to get cured. They are facing death. But in the midst of that, you can prepare them. You can prepare them to be healed individuals facing death calmly and peacefully. And there may be no limits to cure, but there may be limits to cure, but there's no limit to caring. Yeah, there's no limit to caring of an individual. And that's just the knowledge that these patients have, that we are there for them itself, is a big reassurance for them. They come to us in the desperate feeling that there's no one to go to, because many of the times, the last few consultations, the primary doctor would have given cues that you needn't come back. And then there's nowhere to go. Still they'll be having symptoms and all that. So to just know that there's someone to care for them makes a big difference for them. And our aim is not just to add few more days into their life, but to add quality into whatever days are remaining, and not to add suffering. In fact, many times we see that medical treatment itself can be a suffering to them when it is not beneficial. So sometimes the treatment is more distressing than the disease itself. Just to go through the disease will be more easy than going through the treatment and the related side effects. So if we can help them to make that decision, that just prolonging days, somehow prolonging days with all kinds of treatment is not going to be beneficial, but just to have that quality in whatever days are remaining, if we can just get that knowledge across to them, that itself is a big service actually. Yeah. Compassion, we heard about compassion yesterday also. I think that's important moving feeling which is within us, which is helping us to move in areas like this. Palliative medicine actually is not a very sought after area in medicine, and it's many times it can be very much emotionally draining. It is very time consuming. You yourself can get burned out, but when you do this with compassion, move with compassion. Yesterday we heard that Jesus moved with compassion, ministered. So I think that this, we have to take it as a calling and as a ministry in our life. And when we do it with compassion, God gives us that strength to move forward, to keep on pressing. And like candles, lighting candles, we can inspire others to act. This should not be only with the palliative physician. I always tell this principles, palliative principles, we have to give it to all the doctors in the hospital, because every patient who come to them, we need to have these aspects in caring for them. We need to be compassionate, and we need to offer whatever is good for them and not to offer what is not going to benefit the patient. And in all this, keep Christ in the heart of your work. And like what I heard yesterday, do not do it for Christ, but do it with Him. When we do it with Christ, He gives us a strength to